I'm Teresa Coraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Fang has a new article out for paid subscribers called Moderna Surveillance Operations Targeted Independent Media Voices. And this gives new information as to why sex allegations from 20 years prior suddenly became a media feeding frenzy against Russell Brand. So I'll be looking at that, and then also 3 other instances where I think we should be paying attention to the Tao Te Ching that says, in all things, watch the timing. One of those is from a video that I made back in January of 2022, looking at digging into the data around the vaccine. The second one will be around the Holocaust narrative and why it came out 20 years after the supposed fact. And the third will be looking even further back at the story of Jesus and why that came out 30 years after his supposed death, with no mention ever of the guy before that. Let's do this. Fang writes, a series of internal company reports and communications reviewed by Real Clear Investigations show that Moderna has worked with former law enforcement and public health officials and a drug industry-funded non-government organization called the Public Good Projects, PGP, to confront the root cause of vaccine hesitancy by rapidly identifying and shutting down misinformation. Part of this effort includes providing talking points to some 45,000 healthcare professionals on how to respond when vaccine misinformation goes mainstream. PGP and Moderna have created a new partnership called the Infodemic Training Program to prepare healthcare workers to respond to alleged vaccine-related misinformation. Lee continues, the company has also used artificial intelligence to monitor millions of global online conversations to shape the contours of vaccine-related discussion. The internal files, shorthanded here as the Moderna reports, show high-profile vaccine critics were closely monitored, particularly skeptics in independent media, including Michael Schellenberger, Russell Brand, and Alex Berenson. PGP, which was funded by a $1.3 million donation from the Biotechnology and Innovation Organization, a lobby group representing Pfizer and Moderna, has identified alleged vaccine misinformation and helped facilitate the removal of content from Twitter, among other social media platforms, throughout 2021 and 2022. Lee then goes to 2023, where Moderna was going to have a very bad third quarter because the majority of people in the U.S. were refusing to get more boosters. So they ended up posting a loss of $3.6 billion. In August of 2023, the PGP flagged 2 of Russell Brand's videos. One was about Jonathan Van Tam, a senior British health official who'd just taken a job with Moderna. Lee quoted Russell that the company had just made a fortune during the pandemic selling vaccines to the government, and that the government worker that bought all those vaccines was now moving through the revolving door. In the other, Russell talks about documents that reveal the CDC knew vaccines wouldn't stop transmissions even before they mandated them. Lee continues, the following month, several media outlets reported that several women who insisted on anonymity were claiming that Brand had abused them nearly 20 years ago. The ensuing media firestorm, which led to YouTube demonetizing his account, became fodder for other Moderna misinformation reports. The company warned that the cancellation of Brand was sparking a backlash among social media users who believe that he may be targeted by government and corporate censors for his outspoken opposition to pandemic narratives. In a Moderna high-risk report, the company noted that speculation was swirling, that allegations are part of a conspiracy to silence the comedian, who had been a vocal opponent of COVID-19 vaccines. The report linked an X video of Brand sharply criticizing Moderna and Pfizer for generating $1,000 of profit every second in 2021. The specific claim of profiteering was a mainstream claim, a statistic that had been produced by Oxfam. Nowhere in its reports on Brand did Moderna highlight any incorrect information. But the reports noted that they monitored Brand because he has a large platform with over 6.6 million YouTube subscribers and over 21 million followers across multiple social media platforms. Moreover, his videos are widely circulated in anti-vaccine spaces, where he is viewed as a truth-teller and threat to authority. I want to pause right here and ask, now that I've given you a real fucking journalist who is saying the exact same thing that I have said using facts and logic in several episodes based on my over 100 hours of analyzing Russell Brand, do you now believe him? Or are you going to accuse him of thinking with his hormones too? I have said that it is virtue signaling to speak truth to power. What really matters is speaking truth to your friends. And I am talking about friends here who say things like, oh yeah, I've seen a lot of good-looking guys in my time, as if that's what I'm responding to with Russell Brand rather than the quality of his thought. And then guys who say, well, on behalf of all of the women who have been abused, I take offense at what you're saying. Or who say, yeah, my brother, he was a charming psychopath too, as if I am not a good judge of character because I am a woman. And I think you've got to get over that kind of thinking because we are tearing ourselves down. And if someone came and accused you of the same things that Russell Brand is being accused of and had no data to back it up, I would defend you. And while I'm at it, I don't need anyone else to send me the video of Russell Brand's secret Illuminati hand signals. I think that politicians are actually actors, but we shouldn't actually have to make the point that actors are actors. And all of these are from the era in which Russell was an actor playing in Get Him to the Greek, a character from a fraternity that used hand signals, ones that are all written by scriptwriters. We get that, right? And in the last decade, none of those examples have been brought up from when Russell Brand is actually being Russell Brand rather than being a character. So this is something that I think we need to clarify in our thinking. As we all know, though, correlation is not causation, and temporality, things following quickly after another, does not prove anything. But it does provide an important hypothesis that needs to be considered when there's not another hypothesis to explain what is it that triggered this happening at this time. Another example of that is in a video that I made in January 2022 called Digging into the Data. And I think it's important to go back to these because it's easy to forget what it felt like at that time when we were under mandates and masking and everyone was trying to get out some real information. That was really when I started paying attention to Russell Brand. And I don't think we should forget about those kinds of things. In this video, what I looked at was an epiphany that I had in the middle of the night that all of the formatting of the different reports that were coming out county to county that showed the unvaxxed were dying at multiples of the level of the vaxxed were all being done by the CDC. That all these independent counties that seemed like they should have been independent verification instead were sending their information to the CDC, who was then sending it back in slightly different formats, but all executive quality reports that bolded the fact that unvaxxed were dying in droves. And at the time when I was making that video, I got an email from my friend who does Wikispooks, and he showed me a UK study that showed that the unvaxxed were dying kind of in waves at different age groups, and they would die suddenly, and then the death rate would go back down to normal, and then it would happen again and again. And those happened to correspond with the waves in which the vaccines were being rolled out. And then looking at the methodology, it showed that they were not counting them as being vaxxed until 21 days later. So again, the temporality of people dying within 21 days of the vaccine, but then being counted as unvaxxed, shows that that is a relationship to pay attention to. Another instance of mysterious timing is World War II and the Holocaust. At the end of World War II, you had soldiers who were all writing their diaries. You had the major statesmen who were the victors, who were writing their well-publicized memoirs. Why did none of those ever mention an extermination program of Jews? You would think that that would be the ultimate justification for having just fought those wars. Instead, nothing is said until 1961. Why 20 years later was that suddenly something that became such an important thing that later 180 Holocaust movies would be made in the period of 5 years? What changed in 1961? As I wrote in Kissinger and the Balfour Declaration, the Great War was turned into the First World War by involving the United States. Germany, from a position of strength with no battle fought on German soil, had offered peace in 1916 with no reparations or annexation of land, only going back to the pre-war status quo. This is not a history under dispute. It would have hurt no one but the bankers, some of whom had loaned the Kaiser money for the war while others funded Great Britain and France. None of these loans could be repaid without a loser to be charged reparations. Who convinced the U.S. to enter a war on another continent in which they were not threatened in any way? In his 1961 speech on the Balfour Declaration, Benjamin Friedman provided evidence that the Bolshevik Jews of Germany told England not to agree to peace, and they would bring the political, economic, and media pressure of Jews in the U.S. to convince President Wilson to agree to enter the war. In exchange, they wanted Palestine. And Benjamin Friedman was present in Versailles during the peace negotiations when the International Coalition of Zionists showed up and presented this piece of paper. What Friedman didn't expose but could have should be called a Holocaust of Germans, in which 5.7 million starved to death in open-air prisons. And this is after the war. The stories of their firebombing and also of being taken into slavery, millions, into the Soviet Union, into other countries. This is a history that would have been coming out. And the reason it didn't is because the narrative was flipped and turned into this is what was done to the Jews, when in fact it had been the reverse. And my final question, which is a prequel of things to come. Why is it that the person who started this major movement and revolution and a new religion is never mentioned by name until 40 years after his supposed death? Does it have anything to do with the fact that then in 70 CE, the empire had just crushed that movement, and they got to rewrite the narrative with their own pacifist savior? For an important look at where we've been, this is Digging into the Data, and this is Kissinger and the Balfour Declaration. Thank you for watching.